Welcome again, Carol.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's wonderful to have you here. You're the last person who knew all four of them in the beginning, right? You and Mandy didn't know Bill, so
I knew Bill and all of the California folks because I lived in Denver at the time where I've now moved back to. So Judy and Whit and Bill and the folks who were involved from the beginning. Yeah.
yeah, and you wrote the book about Bill. I'm so excited to learn more about this. But let's begin from the beginning. How did the book come into your life?
The book came into my life in a very interesting way. This is back, I lived in Florida for about 30 years, but before that, I lived in Denver and now I'm back in Denver. So in my early days in Denver, it was clearly a meant to be because I received an invitation from an organization I did not belong to. And I had never gotten one before, and I never got one afterwards. But in that particular memo, it said that Bill Thetford and Judy Scutch were going to be out at Regis College, which is a man's Catholic university here, and that she was going to speak. Bill would not, but he would be there. Well, I had been a student for a while, and I thought, well, you know, I'd been a student for maybe a year. And I thought, well, I wouldn't miss that for anything in the world. So we went out, listened to Judy, and she was wonderful, but they had it set up outside, and May in Denver can be cool. Well, they didn't say they were going to be outside, so I didn't go with a coat or a sweater or anything like that. And pretty soon I thought I'm going to freeze to death. So I just thought I've got to go inside a building someplace. So I just got up, walked into the very first door I could find, and there was a tall, handsome man standing in the corner. And it's like, that has to be Bill Thetford. So we had a little chat. So that's how I met him in the beginning. And then later on, there was a life presented another situation so that I ended up flying out there and meeting everybody. And it was wonderful. As to how I got the course in the very first place, we had a house guest, and the house guest sent us a subscription to New Realities magazine as a house present. And the first edition that came was April of 1977. And it had in it the very first article that was ever written about the course. So it told something about where it came from, and it included the introduction to the text. And when I read that introduction to the text, I thought, my search is over, because I had been reading spiritual books and being interested in stuff since I was like 6 years old. So this is like a lot of years. I'd been reading stuff and looking and attending things, whatever there was to attend. But when I read that, I ordered it immediately. And I remember when it was delivered, that was, of course, in the 3 books in plain brown wrapper. And I remember when it was delivered, holding it and thinking, my search is over. This is what I've been looking for. And that has remained true all these 45 years. Nothing better out there, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree. Yeah, so you started to study the course. How was it back then? Did you study together with them?
No,
No.
there was no together. Nobody
Oh.
I knew anything about it. And so ultimately, after a while, I talked to a number of my friends and got a few of them, maybe 12 or 14, sort of interested enough that they ordered the books. And so I started a little study group. So that was my first little outreach. And then I think the word sort of started to spread because nobody had ever heard of this, but occasionally I would get phone calls from unknown people saying, I understand you know something about A Course in Miracles, and are you going to do anything about that? I don't know what they said, but I said, I'm not doing anything, just reading it, but I'll take your name. And if I ever decide to do a class or whatever, I'll let you know. So I collected names until I had about 25 names or so and called them all together at my house and told them a little bit about it and said, well, if people are interested in doing a class, I guess I'll do a class and we can start next Tuesday night. My husband was in the real estate business, so he could get us a building to meet in. And everybody but one said, yes, we want to be in a class. The only one who didn't had choir practice that night and couldn't come. So otherwise, and I said, well, I had no idea what I was doing. So I thought, well, there's a lot of material in here. So we'll make this a 15-week class. It will just last over the summer. We started in June. And after they left, and this was a Thursday night, and I said, we'll start next Tuesday. And I thought, oh my, what have I done? What have I just committed to do? So the next morning I got up and I sort of meditated, and a really interesting thing happened. I started to get a kind of a download of, okay, this would be the normal what you would do at the beginning. And that remained for the remainder of the 14 classes. After I did a Tuesday night class, on the next morning, I would get up and kind of meditate and just sort of get a little download. Okay, this is what you do this week. So it was nothing I ever expected to do. It was kind of presented to me as like, I guess this is my job. So that was the short version of how all that started.
Yeah. Did you take classes with Ken Wapnick or Bill or
At that
Helen?
point, nobody was doing
No,
classes.
no. So they weren't doing it either.
This is like way back at the very beginning.
Yeah.
And of course, Ken lived up in New York at that point,
Mhm.
and he was the first person. Bill didn't do any classes. He had no intention of being known about this, much less do any classes. And Judy, who was married to Bob Scutch at the time, they decided they would start this little foundation as an organization to actually publish the course. They didn't see it as a teaching mechanism or anything. It was just simply some organization had to be the official publisher. And so that was it. So people didn't, it's not like in the beginning, people just jumped in and said, oh boy, I'm going to teach this. There wasn't anybody to do that in the beginning. So it just evolved like it apparently needed to evolve over the years. And so, of course, now there are untold numbers of people who are facilitating groups or doing whatever. But at the beginning, that was basically unheard of. Now, John met Helen about the same time I met Bill. So he started in his own kind of small way, doing groups and so on and so forth. So the two of us have continued ever since.
So that's John Mundy, you mean?
Yeah, John Monday.
Yeah, right. So this is so interesting. It sounds to me like you were very open and you could hear the spirit teaching
Oh,
you how to teach, right?
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I had been very interested in just, shall we say, spiritual things. Well, that's a very large category since I was a little girl. I remember going to church when I was 6 years old. We moved to another town, and a very lovely man was doing a very nice sermon. But I had this, it was like I was a little girl, but I was having grown up thoughts. And the thought said, that's not really what this teaching is. That's not really accurate or something. So somehow this has kind of been my path since I was very young.
Hmm.
And I'm incredibly grateful for that. So that when I became an adult, I searched out every single thing I could find to read, or there weren't any classes to go to. So you just had to, anything you learned, you had to read or simply begin to kind of download on your own.
Can you
And that, of
speak a
course,
little bit more to that? What it is like for you to receive the download? What is it a
And
voice?
the way I experience, and my intuition still does this to this day. I call them my sort of intuitive diagrams or telegrams. It's kind of like it's like a message or a do this or whatever. Almost seems like it comes from the left hand side and kind of passes across my awareness, and it's kind of like the whatever the instruction is. Like way back in more recently, I guess it was 2017 or 18. I'm just in my family room working away. I lived alone at that point. And all of a sudden, in comes the little guidance telegram that says, record all the lessons with commentary. Now, when this happens, I talk out loud. It sounds crazy. I talk out loud to my intuition. I remember standing there saying, you want me to do what? Do you have any idea how long it's going to take to record all those lessons with all of the necessary thoughtfulness that goes in ahead of time to put in the proper commentary? And it's like, record the lessons with, it's like, Spirit is not interested in my commentary about this. And when it was time to record the course, the very same thing happened. Like several years later, because I think I did that a couple of years ago, it was the very same intuitive sense of record the text. And I had the same comment. It's like, this is going to take forever to do. And it did. It took a year to do. It's like, I have given away a massive amount of time in making all of the things that have been created, to make the course more accessible. So those two were both very time consuming. And I'm not sorry I spent the time doing it.
Of course, of course. It's so interesting to listen to you. I experience it the same way, and I always argue. I always say no to the game.
Wonderful. A fellow arguer that goes, you want me to do what?
Exactly. I can't. I don't have time. It's not possible.
Yes,
It's just
exactly.
again and again the same. Do this. Do this.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I
Yeah.
love that. I think that's wonderful. I've never heard it of all the hundreds of people I've talked to. I've never heard anybody say what you just said. Is
Really?
would download these messages and you would argue with it. It's like, do it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And I found it easier and easier to say yes. I know I will end up there anyway. So
Exactly. It's
yeah,
like I really truly did not ever feel like I would refuse to do it. I just had to argue there with a
yeah,
little bit. It's like it was always so shocking when it came because it would come unsolicited out of nowhere. So it was kind of like an automatic response to not because in my heart of hearts I would ever deny a request like that.
yeah. How do you know that it is the spirit and not the ego? How do you differ
Uh,
in the voices?
there's something about, I've done this for so long. I just automatically know um, there's something about the way of feeling guided or protected. Protect is not quite the right word because I don't feel unsafe, but it's kind of like all of a sudden, it's like I will get an assignment and it feels very clear and it seems very reasonable. In other words, like whatever it is. And uh, it's just a very strong sense of certainty that
Mm,
this is what I now need to do. Coming out here to Denver, I never ever dreamed I would leave Florida. I lived in Florida for 33 years and I had lived in Denver before that. I wasn't born here, but I came here as a young woman. And it was like a very clear move back to Denver. And it was like totally unsolicited, unexpected. I had no intention to do this. It's a huge amount of work. Finally, this week, I'm closing on selling my house. I rented it for a year because of what the market was doing. And so it's a huge amount of work to get rid of half your possessions, pack everything up, make all the arrangements. This is not something you just do overnight. And so it engaged a great deal of work and money and everything else. But when that message comes, I would never consider not doing it. And I'm still kind of discovering little by little why I'm here. I was not given the message as to here's why you have to go to Denver, just go to Denver. So that's still in the evolutionary process. And it's my younger son, who is a saint, lives here. So that was a big draw as well. The
Yeah.
other one was in New York. I said, I've got one magician and one saint. So
Mm.
I'm a very lucky mama.
Mm. So you have lived the course for 45 years. What has it meant to you?
It's meant that I've learned the essential things that most people do not know, which is once a word or a deed is spoken, it's gone. We act like the things in our past, what we've done, what we haven't done, our what we've where we've missed the boat or something like that, is kind of following along behind us and influencing right now. That's a belief that's held almost universally, and it's 100% wrong.
Yeah.
And so one of the first messages is this moment that we're in is the only time that exists. There is no past. And there's some lessons that say that, the past is gone, it can touch me not, and whatever. But for most people, it's like, yeah, that's a lesson. But yeah, the past really is there. Well, no, it really isn't. So there's no past and there's no future. And not only is there only this moment, and this is really important, in this moment, I only have two choices. I don't have 47 choices about where to place my attention. I could either, and this is not a good choice, I can either listen to my ego directive, and be engaged in the promotion and protection of my sense of ego self, or I can stay in the present moment and follow my intuition or my guidance, whatever you want to call it. And so every moment is a brand new, clean moment. And these are my two choices. And so if you more and more and more obviously choose the side of I'm going to follow my intuition and I do choose to be truly helpful, then life cannot help but get better and better and better. So that's what I would tell anybody who chooses, and people might say, oh, okay, well, if I don't have a past, but I do seem to have some difficulties and concerns and phobias or whatever. So if it didn't come from my past, where did they come from? And where it comes from, and this is sort of brain science, if you will, that until we're about 3 years old, the left brain, which is the thinking part of the brain, hasn't come online yet. It's physically present, but it's not operative. Only the right brain, which is intuitive, I'm operating on instinct and intuition. And in those early 3 years, when I have no left brain functioning, I have no awareness of what's happening. In other words, I'm experiencing it, but it's not like what I'm experienced is made known to me at the moment. However, those early years and the experience in those early years colors my notions about myself and the world. Is the world safe? Is it helpful? Is it frightening? And see, no discussion in your mind is going on. It's just that we automatically start to build some defenses, and we start to, and unfortunately, we download because of our lack of understanding of what's going on. We take those early experiences, and from them, we make decisions about who I am and what I am, and am I deserving? Am I worthy? Am I whatever? And unfortunately, we now grow to maturity with some of these notions from a very immature brain that doesn't know what's going on. And we think this is some kind of a truth about myself. And this is really tragic because nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing that I say or do can ever change my own fundamental, loving, eternal nature. But when I don't know that, I can believe falsehoods about myself. I can think I'm unworthy, or I can't do things right, or I don't deserve this. Being unworthy and undeserving are the two most common words I hear when I do counseling with people, that this is what they actually do believe is true about them. They don't think this is a belief. They think this is true, which is tragic.
Yeah.
Because there's not a shred of truth to it. But if you don't do work like this, you're likely not ever to encounter a circumstance where you can be set straight, so to speak, so that you can go to the end of your life believing things about yourself that aren't true. And since the world of time and space is always an outer picture of what I believe about myself, so if I'm believing things that are inaccurate and self-destructive, and my world is going to reflect that, then um, I'm in self-maintained prison, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the course is very clear that guilt, which is totally unwarranted, which says, because that says I've wrecked myself or somebody else permanently. Guilt is always a request for punishment and we'll always get it. And it's like, oh dear, if I don't know these fundamental things, if I think, oh, I can just feel guilty in my own mind and maybe nobody will know. No, that's not true. In other words, you will set yourself up for punishment of some kind. I look at what's going on over in the Middle East. This war has been going on between Jews and Arabs, if we're going to just lump them into their ancient categories, since Old Testament days. This just keeps, and each side really wants the worst for the other side, not understanding that what I want for them is going to happen to me because that thought is in my mind. And if it's in my mind, I'm going to experience the nature of that thought. It's like I'd go, hey, Middle East, could I have your attention for an hour? See if we could straighten this out. You could stop wrecking your lives totally unnecessarily.
Yeah, that's today's lesson, isn't it?
It is. It's like
Yeah.
it's essential that we understand how life works, which is everything in what I call my three-dimensional world starts with thought processes, invisible thoughts in my mind, but there's no such thought as a thought that does not manifest in some way in my life. So when I'm wishing myself or someone else ill, or I'm invested in revenge or whatever it might be, I'm setting myself up for accidents, for disease, for difficulties of every imaginable kind, and then we think it's the other person or situation that did it. So since we think we aren't responsible, that we're just the victims of something, we're not even able to take a first step in the healing of it. If I don't know what's causing something, I have no idea where to start to try to fix it. So I try to fix things in ways that get me nowhere. Does that make sense?
Totally, totally. So before we start to talk about the book you wrote about Bill, do you still study the course? Do you do the lessons? Do you practice?
It's sort of like life becomes automatically a practice. In other words, life kind of automatically becomes presuming the best, wishing everybody well, wanting to be as helpful as possible. So it's like that becomes a kind of a steady mental state, in which case answers and good fortune and so on just kind of drops in your lap automatically. So the point really is um, it becomes a permanent state of mind rather than something that I have to uh, like, okay, I've got to be sure today to think the right thoughts. In other words, it's like that just gets built in, kind of like we've got eyes and ears. So in the morning, we don't go, okay, I have to learn how to see. It's like nobody does that. So it's just the automatic built in, we're here to be truly helpful. And then listen for whatever intuition indicates at that moment what truly helpful is. And then you get automatically, I'm going to say, rewarded so that life is very supportive and satisfactory. And it's not because you've been asking, I want this, and please make this happen, and so on and so forth. It's like an example would be, because I'm right here. When I moved out here, my late husband owned this condo. He passed away about 5.5 years ago. And it turns out to be the exact same square footage. It's a large condo as my house in Florida. So I didn't have to think like, what do I have to get rid of furniture wise? And 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 they my son Nelson said my husband smoked, so he said the place had a horrible smoke odor that it was impossible to get rid of. So a good friend of his owns a contracting company, so they just tore it out right down to the concrete block and rebuilt it, so it's brand new. I'm the first person in after the rebuilding process, which finished right before I needed to get here. And so when the moving van comes, and I just find this fascinating, you've got 6 or 7 guys bringing heavy furniture up the front stairs. I'm on the second floor. So you can't go, oh, let me see, where am I going to put that? It was like something took over that said, put this here, put this here, put this here. And when it was all said and done, I said, furniture, you did a great job of putting yourself where you wanted to be. I literally didn't have time to think through. I mean, I knew bedroom furniture went in the bedroom, but in terms of other things, it was like this great blessing of everything just finding in its place, in terms of furniture, kind of like everything else just works out in your life. And everything I tried to do to furnish it just worked out. It was like I was led. See these drapes behind me, these kind of teal colored drapes. I knew that basically that's a color that I would want. And I had this very strong message like, go to Target, which is a big store here, and you will find them. And so, as crazy as that sounds, I get that kind of guidance about very mundane things. So I went to Target, I needed 3 grapes, 1 for that one and 2 for here. They had exactly 3 and 3 only in exactly the color I was looking for. See, that's the kind of thing that it's like life being cooperative, I guess, with it. So it's just in little ways like that, as well as more momentous things, but it makes life flow comfortably and easily. The building that's out the window that's in front of me, it's another condominium unit, and it's the perfect color that matches some stuff in my living room over here. So it's like I didn't have to pray. Like I sure would like for the view out my front window to be lovely, and it just automatically is. That's the kind of thing that happens when you stay focused on, I want to be in the present moment, and I do want to be truly helpful.
Yeah.
It's automatic.
It sounds like the um, Holy Spirit's way of remembering who we are is automatic in you
Yes.
all the time.
And that's what we can do. In other words, when our intention is to be helpful and follow our intuition and make life as comfortable as possible for those who are sent to us. And
Mm.
I do a vast amount of counseling, with people all over everywhere. And I love to do it. Everybody's got the same problem, which is they think this person out here causes my problem here. It's like, nope, I caused my own problem by hanging on to guilt, but my problem person over here, quote unquote, is going to be the perfect mirror to show me what I still feel guilty about. So we have to reframe, this is not the enemy, this is a messenger. This is a mirror giving you exact information for what you need to let go of, change your mind about, and recognize you are not guilty. You've made a mistake, as we all do often, but you are not guilty. Guilt is a request for punishment. You'll always get it. So we must realize what we're holding against ourselves. And you'd say, well, people can just figure out what they're holding against themselves. Only partially. We may be aware of some things that we blame ourselves for, but the problem is there's a great deal of unconscious stuff that we carry around. And whether guilt is conscious or unconscious, it's going to be a life wrecker. It's going to interfere with the flow of my life. So you can see why the Course tells us we're going to heal through relationships. Because if I don't have a relationship person out here that's mirroring for me or revealing to me guilt that I'm carrying around, there's no way that I can heal it because I don't know it's there. I just know life isn't working out. So if we can see the problem people, as we have designated them, as being the best thing that ever happens to us, because we're finally going to be able to go, oh, have I ever been selfish? Have I ever been inconsiderate? Have I ever been whatever it is they blame the other person for? And once they recognize, oh, yeah, I guess so, then I lead them through a process where they can realize that the times when they've been selfish or overbearing or whatever, I'll have them find a time that they can remember that at that moment, with whatever the circumstances were and whatever they were afraid of and whatever was going on, that their selfish behavior, let's just say that's something that they blame themselves and somebody else for, at that moment, with the sense of threat, with the lack of understanding, with whatever the details were, their behavior was the highest and best they were capable of mustering at that point. And that does not call for punishment, but for correction. So the Course and all that we can learn from it is enormously practical in making our daily lives better and better and better, because it helps us discover that guilt is never warranted. We make a lot of mistakes, but mistakes are for correction and not for punishment.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
And it feels so good when you say it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the point, is to go, oh, I'm not the villain after all. I don't deserve to be punished. We are all doing, this is so key. We are all doing at any given moment the highest and best of which we are capable.
Yeah.
And that may look terrible to somebody else, but if it's the highest and best with my programming and how I was brought up or what I believe about myself or something like that, it still does not deserve punishment,
Mm.
which gets us nowhere. We go backwards rather than forwards under those circumstances. So there's so much that's so incredibly practical about the Course. This is not just some fluffy, airy, fairy, spiritual something or another. This is like if you want your life to be better, practice these lessons, because these lessons are opportunities for me to reorient my attention so that it's more and more and more. I'm going to think in ways that are in the best interest of myself, my everybody else, and the world. They're very practical
Yeah.
in that way.
So let's talk about the book a little bit before we invite more people to ask questions. So you wrote this book about Bill. Was that, a download as well? How did it happen?
That was a very difficult book to write
Yeah.
because I interviewed 28 people, and I knew I needed to do that. I needed all these people who were close to Bill to have their input in this book. So the amount of research that was necessary just made it take me 2 years to write this, but a lot of that wasn't the writing part, it was the research part that went into it. But I had a very strong feeling all along that Bill was there.
Yeah.
I would get signs along the way that were sort of Bill Thetford signs. And an aside, I have a friend who was very talented psychically. And every time I would see her, she said, Bill's over your left shoulder in that blue sweater, like he always is. He said, Bill follows you around all the time. Well, I don't know what that means. I have no way of confirming or denying, but it's what she saw. But I had a couple of really pretty fast, really, here are two. I won't bore you with a lot. I was driving someplace in the southern part of the Orlando area. And I was in a 3-lane highway, and I was in the innermost lane because I was about to make a left-hand turn. And in the lane next to me, the cars parted a little bit so that I could see the license plate of the car that was just ahead of the car next to me. And it said WNT 65. Well, William Newton Thetford. And the course began in 1965. So I thought, okay, Bill, I got it. You're right here. But the most dramatic one was when I was writing the very last chapter. And I mean, I'm down, I'm the I don't didn't exactly know it, but I was on the last 2 pages. And it's a 320-page book. So I'm at the very end. So I'm sort of thinking out loud. I don't know if I'm saying it out loud. I'm in my house by myself, or if I'm just thinking it. Okay, Bill, I really have had the sense that you've been here all along. So I want to know what's the name of this book. And so I kind of get this inner message that says, you'll know when you get to the end. And I said, well, I am at the end. I'm down to the last page or two. And he said, you're not at the very end. And it's like, okay, technically I'm not at the very end. So as I continue to write, when you write, you never know exactly what you're going to write next. All of a sudden, blah, blah, blah. And never again will we forget to laugh. And it jumped off the page. We'll never forget to laugh is the title of the book. But a more amazing thing happened. Once that happened and I got to the end of the book, I said, okay, Bill, I'm probably talking out loud since I'm in my house by myself. How am I going to know absolutely, totally for certain, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that you've been helping me write this book? And I get this inner message, kind of the thought that came in that said, write to Judy Scutch Whitson and ask her about the plaid dress. And I thought, oh, that's really scary to do because this is very, very specific. What if I ask her about a plaid dress and she says, I don't know anything about a plaid dress? Is that going to negate, every single thing I've felt was going along? So a couple of days later, I sent her an email and I didn't tell her why I was asking. I just said, Judy, I have this really strange question. Do you know anything? Does a plaid dress mean anything to you? Well, I get back an email with, indeed it does. She includes the picture of herself in a plaid dress and her baby sister, who's 9 years younger than she. And it was the very first picture that her parents had brought in the professional photographer to take a picture of their two girls together. So it was a treasured picture of hers because, and that baby sister had passed away by the time she was killed in a plane crash. And so that was a treasured picture. And it's like, there's no way you can argue with that kind of feedback. I mean, when he says, ask Judy about the plaid dress, and I do, and she said, yes, that was a treasure. It's like, well, then there's no more to question. Let's put it that way. Also, do you see this lamp behind me that's right where my fingertip is with the white lampshade, almost white? That furniture was in my dining room back in Florida. And sometimes I would leave a light on at night, in case I'd get up and wander around, which basically never happened, but, habit, you just leave a light on here or there. So I woke up very early one morning, not on purpose, but I did. So I got up, got out of my bedroom and started walking down the hall. Living room was on this side of the hall and the dining room was here. And as I approached the big entrance into the dining room, thinking, as I'm just starting to think the thought, oh, I've got to go turn the light off, it turns itself off. And I thought, that bulb did not burn out at this very instant that I'm thinking this thought. So I went around through the kitchen, came through the door from the kitchen to the dining room, flipped the switch, and it came back on. And as I'm standing there, instantly, I get this sort of inner message that it's like, there's Bill, there's Jerry. It's like, and the message is they're all yucking it up. And it's like, this is just so you'll know we're all here. It was very compelling, to say the least, and impossible to argue with. Mm-hmm. In other words, it's like, the light did turn itself off, or they turned it off or made it go off. I don't know how that works. But so, when you keep getting feedback like this, there's just simply nothing left to question. Mm-hmm. That everybody's looked after and protected and trying to convey, however they convey, that everybody's beloved and safe and has their place here and have a right to be here, and hopefully helping us claim that for ourselves.
Yeah. And that we are all one.
Yes.
In constant connection.
Absolutely. Because these kinds of phenomenon or inner thoughts or something can't occur unless we are. In other words, if we were all isolated little dots, that can't happen. It's like there is one universal mind, if you want to think of it that way. It's hard for us to wrap our heads around that, but living out of it is not hard, because that means you want to think as kindly and as helpfully as you can for every single person you think about or encounter, or as a family member or anything else. So it really does direct your life, knowing that everybody is really all here and all connected, and we can be helpful to everybody by wishing everybody well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm so grateful that you have written that book. It feels like Bill makes the course, I don't know, light and joyful, and it's a lot of.
Yes, and he was a hilariously funny person. In other words, he had an amazing sense of humor, and it was just a treasure to know him. Would run back and forth to San Francisco. That's an easy 2-hour flight from Denver to San Francisco. And he would come and visit us at my house. And it was like the treasure of a lifetime to just be able to kind of hang out with Bill. And he'd go with me when we go watch the boys with the soccer practice. And he just became part of the family. And I think on his last visit before he died, of course, nobody knew that was going to happen. The last time he was there, he said, I think there's some kind of work that we need to do together, but I don't know what it is. And because he was very much an introvert and I am not. And so I thought, well, whatever it is we need to do together, I guess will present itself, because we couldn't at that very instant, having a cup of coffee in the kitchen, figure out what that would be. But we said, well, we'll know. And it's like, well, this was our joint venture.
Wow.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Let's open up for more questions. So you can either raise your hand as Marie did now, or you can use your digital hand. I will put you in the spotlight.
Mute myself. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. So I thought, oh, I don't know who this person is, Carol Howe. I don't know. And then when you started to talk, I thought, wait a minute, I recognize this voice. Yes, I've listened to your lessons. I thought, wow, hi, I know this person.
And that, and that lesson assignment was an assignment. I had no intention of recording the lessons. And one day I'm minding my business and sort of the intuition says, record all the lessons with commentary. And when I get an inner, since I was in my house by myself, I'll get an inner silent message, but I'm likely to talk out loud. I said, you want me to do what? It was the end of 2017 or 2018, like in December. I said to whomever or whatever, do you have any idea how long it would take to record every one of these lessons with commentary? Well, the voice was not interested in my fussing. It just said, record the lessons with commentary. It's like, okay. So it was a very, very, very big job, as you can imagine. But that was an assignment. I did not dream this up on my own. I was already busy doing a lot of other stuff, but the assignment came and I've learned to do what I'm asked to do.
Thank you. And I think I did, it was last year I did that, listen to your, because what happened, that voice talked to Anna and she's doing the same. So we have it now in Swedish. She's recording every day the lessons.
Great.
So yeah,
great.
It's just amazing. So I have a question for you. And it's about fear. And I'm curious, in the book, it talks about the last hinder. The last hinder, the fear of God. Yeah. So, and it speaks about God, he takes the last step. So what is your experience about that?
Well, my experience is kind of, I guess it would be tied up with intuition. And first of all, we all have a kind of an anthropomorphic view of God, like some guy hanging out up in the clouds, or like a somebody that's the ruler of the universe or whatever. And if you think of God not as a something or a someone, but the omniscient presence, the loving presence that is the actual core and truth of everything and everybody and so on. It's kind of like the world of form kind of overlays but doesn't disturb the actual presence, which is we're experiencing this presence right now while we have a conversation. In other words, it's like, and it can't ever be anything other than a loving presence. Now, when the thinking mind gets involved, and then once, if you do a dive into guilt or something like that, you can, and because the thoughts in our mind are creating our three-dimensional world. So we can either create a very nice world with loving, appropriate, helpful thoughts, or we can create a gigantic mess with hateful thoughts or fear-based thoughts or something like that. But no matter what, the underlying reality of everything is always an omnipotent, loving presence that's not in this dogfight, so to speak. It's like it's never altered in any way. And knowing that, and knowing in coincidence with the truth of us can't ever be ruined, and recognizing that relationships are going to help me see where I'm holding things against myself that aren't accurate, and therefore they're kind of blinding me, so to speak, to my own reality. But my own reality doesn't ever go away anyplace. I just lose track of it because I get all caught up in the life of the sense of separate self. Does that make sense?
Yes, but have you yes, thank you. And but have is there like a lot the last step? Is there something like that? Have you experienced the last
Well,
step?
since I'm still alive, it's like I guess I haven't experienced the very last step. But the last step doesn't really concern me because I'm really much more interested in the current step, so to speak, that I'm in, and living my life in as helpful a way as possible, which what accrues to us when we choose to live as helpful a life possible is the life in form that we're living is a very, very happy and satisfactory life. In other words, there's nothing that you want to get rid of in this life when you live it from that perspective, so that you're happy to be here as long as it's sort of our destiny to be here, so to speak. And then we transition out of this form. Does
Yeah.
it bother, are you bothered by something about this that you need to have some certainty about?
No, I have to let it go.
Okay. Well,
I re
see, this is it. Rather than being concerned about something theoretical or something in the future, if we stay in the moment and go, you know, what I really want to do is be helpful right now. And I want to follow my intuition about what helpful looks like, whether it's directed toward yourself or anybody else. And when that's what you're caught up in right now, some of those other questions tend to disappear because this provides a very satisfactory life, and you kind of aren't too interested in what's going to happen later under those circumstances.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, so welcome.
What I'm thinking of, and sometimes I can read the understanding of it, maybe, and I don't know. It's like, for example, Eckhart Tolle or Byron Katie. I also do the work of Byron Katie and her experience, and it was a moment when, and also I heard David Hoffmeister speak about it, and what I re and I just have to let that go. I can see it through the book, their experience. I can understand it,
Well, see,
but I have to.
exactly. And so you bring up a very important point. In our cultures, you know, we're taught that we've got to learn material in order to benefit from it. In other words, I need to learn chemistry if I want to learn how to do something over here. This book is not about learning, but about practicing. That's what makes this book different, really, from any other book we read, because I've read all those books. Anybody you've ever heard of, you know, I started reading way back a long time ago and doing the very same thing you are. I'm looking for what is the right information, until the course came along and it became clear information is not what I need. I have more information than I know what to do with. It's the lived experience that is called for, not the information about something that's going to happen later on. Therefore, the lessons are for putting into practice on the very day that whatever lesson you're on. It's like making a concerted effort, whatever it is that it invites us to think or do or whatever. Let practicing that lesson be paramount. And that you will find will be the experiences you will have, and the kind of clearing of your mind will almost answer the questions before they're asked. But the great error we make in the Western world, not just in the United States, but in all of the Western world, we think, I've got to learn the intellectual material. The Eastern world approaches this differently. In other words, it's more like from experience, I will sort of deduce the information. And that's it's kind of like this is an Eastern document in that regard. And that's what we're asked to do, is to put the ideas into practice.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Wonderful. We are on the top of the hour. Do you have a couple of more minutes if there are more questions, or do you need to go?
Of course, of course.
Wonderful. So do we have more questions? And Jeanette, yes, and I also wanted to say, if you have a question and don't want to speak English, I'm happy to translate. Jeanette, go ahead.
Hello, Carol, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Yeah. Hello. I so appreciate you being here tonight. I have listened to you for hours and hours, and I think you are the best Course in Miracles teacher in the world.
Oh, bless your heart.
Yeah, and you gave me. I also do counseling, and my clients always think the word forgive is sometimes difficult. And you spoke once of you can also say release. Instead of forgive, you can also say release, and you can use the one that resonates best with you.
Yes, and that is a problem all over the world, that we have misunderstood what the word forgive means. We think it's pardoning. In other words, it's like,
I haven't done anything.
Yeah, you're really the problem. I'm just the victim of whatever malfeasance is going on over here. And as long as we think that's what forgiveness is, then we have totally 100% missed the point. In other words, that the process of real forgiveness it's a collaborative effort, so to speak. And the people that we find problematic are doing us a huge service. They're showing us what we're punishing ourselves for, hanging on to guilt for that very word or deed, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And only I can let go of my own guilt. Nobody can reach in there and snatch it out.
No.
And as we mentioned earlier, part of the problem is we carry some guilt that we're not even aware that we're carrying. Yet it's doing its same damage. So if we can grow to be wise enough to see, if I've got a problem person over here, at some level, I need to sort of go, oh, thank you, God. I did not realize I was really blaming myself and therefore punishing myself for that.
Yeah.
The biggest problem is the notion that, oh, I'm the better of the two. And so, yes, you've harmed me, but somehow I've got to rise above it, and a whole bunch of nonsense like that.
I forgive you. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of, I forgive you because you are the problem one, and I'm the victim, and you're the villain,
and I'm the saint.
And I'm the saint, and you're the sinner. Yes. Well, as long as we've got that sort of a very unbalanced, inaccurate, and unloving perspective on things, I'm going to get nowhere. And the reason this is so deadly is because any guilt that we carry is a request for punishment, and 100% of the time we'll get it. So it's like, it does not serve us to disguise the guilt and pretend like it's not there, because it's going to continue to undermine the quality of my life. So when we get our heads straight about this, we can go, thank you, God. that I've been reminded that I'm still blaming myself for being selfish or whatever it is, et cetera, et cetera. It's really crucially important that we let go of guilt.
Yeah, and the course helps us.
Absolutely. That's what so much of this is about, is to help us reframe our own self-assessment. And we know what the self-assessment is by what we see in other people around us.
Yeah, right.
So
okay.
it's very clear when it says we heal through our relationships.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jeanette. And next up is Claes.
There's no sound.
No?
Now there is.
Now there is, yeah. I have perhaps a strange question. I read a thought that in the beginning of Christianity, there was a group or a sort of a movement that claimed that Jesus didn't live in a physical body. And the group still was, they still were Christians, but they claimed that Jesus actually didn't live in a physical body.
That's very interesting. As much as I've read up on that, I have never heard that particular proposal before. That's a new one.
Yeah, for me as well. And I thought that can't be true, because how else could it be that it is here on earth that we are going to find our release?
Well, the thing that's important is the practice of the principles. Let's say Jesus was a physical form, but Jesus wasn't a physical form. In other words, we're going to say no matter what side of that you want to come down on, it's the teachings and the practice that we have available to us today that matter, because we now have a guidebook, so to speak, in how we want to orient our thinking to live our highest and best and most helpful lives. And that's the important part. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the same. And as you said before, I'm still here.
Exactly.
I'm still here. What else can I do? I don't know, but
exactly.
I'm still here.
That's right. And since there are people who are talented in a way that I sense kind of presences or sense guidance or something, but there are other people, we call them psychic people or something, that can sort of actually see forms and things like that. And there have certainly been people through the years who have that particular talent, who see the form, that we recognize as the form of Jesus, so to speak. But I think the truly, truly most important part is not the physical life part, so to speak, as the teaching that he left for us. In other words, that the teaching for how to live our lives so that we can, you might say, experience our highest and best selves, if that's a way to say it. In other words, because how will, let's say, either one of those positions, how does that actually impact your daily life today?
Yeah.
Or does it? It's like what impacts your life today is deciding, I do want to be as loving and as helpful and as tuned in and so on as I'm possibly able to be today.
Yeah.
That's
That's a good guide.
Yes.
of one's life. Yeah.
And there are all sorts of, I mean, over the year, because I was started to search for answers when I was a little kid. So by the time the course came along, I had read so many books. I have no idea how many books, whether it was about spiritual stuff or psychological stuff or psychic stuff, anything about how does life actually work was on my radar, so to speak. And the the fact of knowing, it's like the point was the teaching. The point was, we're here to be truly helpful. We're here to love each other. We're here to do the highest and best we're able at any given moment. But it's claiming our own loving nature, because that's our basic nature, despite whatever the ego processes might be, and living out of that, because that's a win-win-win-win-win for everybody. And that's what we want for ourselves and everybody, is the best.
Yeah.
You don't ever want to wish the worst for everyone. I cannot help but, as possibly mentioned before, I look at this absolute massacre over in the Middle East. And so you've got these two groups of people who have been warring since Old Testament days, and each side wishes the other side ill, wishes the worst for them. But since the actual fact is the thoughts in my mind are creating my reality, you can see the hideous result of two groups of people wishing the worst for the other and getting it themselves.
Yep.
It's an absolutely impossible to miss lesson, if you have any idea at all about how life actually works.
Yeah.
So you decide, you know what? I don't know who I'm going to see. It's nighttime over where you are. So we'll say tomorrow, you don't know who you're going to see, maybe, or where you're going to go. But if you have the mindset wherever you go, that you want whatever encounters you have with whomever, you want the best for them. You want to keep that in your mind as you're interacting with them or thinking about them, and you'll like the result.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're surely welcome.
Thank you, Claes.
Thank you.
It seems like we have answered all the questions.
All righty. Well, wonderful. I'm glad the questions get answered, and knowing that everybody has got help. In other words, it may not be somebody well known like Bill Thetford, or you never know, he might be hanging out around you as well. It's like the thing about being non-corporal is that you're not stuck in one place. So it was he was very present in my life, and that doesn't mean he can't be very present and very helpful to, we don't know who all, but if it's not him, it's somebody. It's something or someone. We are never without help. And the more we want to be helpful to other people and be empathetic with theirs, we don't rescue them. We just are empathetic. We find ways to compliment people or to make their lives a little better at that moment. And when that's on the top of your list, I want whoever it is I'm thinking about or that I'm with to know how much they're cared for.
Hmm.
And you will love the way your life turns out.
You're definitely a role model in that area. I'm looking forward to have a life more like yours.
Oh, bless your heart. Well, it's really not hard at all, and it will create family relationships that are so much. I feel like the luckiest mother in the world. I say that I have one saint and I have one magician, and their lives are really quite amazing. And so those of you who have got kids, or grandchildren, realize that your state of mind and the way you treat them and the things that you teach them, not necessarily directly, but indirectly, will make all the difference in the world in their lives.
Yeah.
And these, my two sons who have children of their own, are passing that same thing on to them. And that's the direction we want to go, rather than teaching them anything at all about what's the matter with them or anybody else. So I highly recommend it. I've watched it happen.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And
so welcome, and best wishes. And if anybody has an extra question or so, you can just send me an email. And remember, all of this material is about practicing, not learning.
right.
Because you're not going to be given a test that you have to regurgitate it on. So it's a way, it's a manual for living. As an interesting aside, I don't remember where this came from, or if I just dreamed it up myself, but it's like the wisdom that's in the Course seems to be the most profound wisdom that has come to us since way back in ancient days in the Far East. You know, this was the philosophy, if you want to call it a philosophy, in the Far East millennia ago.
Yeah.
It's like this is a restatement or a rebirthing of that very early given knowledge. And I think that's very important.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That is really important to me to hear that.
Good. All right, my dears. Well, best wishes to everybody, and I hope to see you again one of these days.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Bye-bye.